titles!
Whoops. Sorry, my lord. Maid Marian and her merry men, Your Majesty.
By Tony Robinson, Your Majesty.
Mark, before we start, tell us why you have a small sausage dog on your knee.
This is Herman, my little silver sausage dog, Gary's little silver sausage dog, who he very generously gave to Robin, I remember, it may have been the first ever episode, I think. He has a little silver sausage dog who bounces up and down on an elastic band.
And you know, when I was about 22, I really did have a sausage dog called Herman.
Is that why you wrote this?
Yeah.
It's the story of your life, isn't it, Maid Marian?
One of your more bizarre writing moments, I think, in the series, creating a small silver sausage dog that Gary.
So
kept
you've
as a pet.
stolen that from the BBC. You
Yes, I
stole
have.
that
This
prop
is
and
my-
you've kept it all that
My
time.
sole souvenir.
So my licence fee money has gone towards you thieving.
Yes, it
You've
has.
stolen from me in a way.
Yeah.
Many of our viewers might not know that after Series 2, you started writing some of the storylines, and by Series 4, you actually wrote your own episode.
Yeah.
We did, with you, that's right. We did Tunnel Vision, which we really enjoyed, which was the Crystal Maze spoof. And
Which some people, irritatingly, think was the best episode we wrote.
I don't see how that's irritating, though.
Doesn't irritate me at all.
How did it all happen? Can you remember?
I remember that the three of us got on very well, and because we were always doing our scenes together, so we'd hang around, cracking jokes on the side of the set and everything while they were setting up. And you knew that I did stand up and that Dave wrote stuff, and and the workload was getting very heavy, wasn't it, at that time? I mean, it was getting very hard to just generate everything because we were turning stuff around very quickly. So you just invited Dave and I to start.
Yeah, my memory is
Come
that
up with ideas,
the BBC commissioned the third series quite late, and you were committed to some other stuff, and you basically came to us and said, "Help me out. Can you come up with some ideas, some storyline ideas?" Which is what we did.
So we had some very pleasant evenings, the
We
three of
did
us. So
indeed,
a
yes.
few bottles of wine, sitting around in one of the cottages we were renting out, coming up with this stuff.
And
It was
Bloopy,
great.
I remember, was I do specifically remember Bloopy as being one of those ideas that emerged.
This was the parody Christmas.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yes, yeah.
I was
Bloopy.
Father Bloopy.
That's right, yeah, which was a lot of fun. And I know that was the one that I particularly remember coming out of one of those evenings.
But I think to be serious about it is what that whole process led to, because now we all write for a living in one way or another, and
You don't write for a living, you write for a fortune.
That's right.
we all write
You
for
write
a
for the
living.
living of a small country.
We all write for a living. But what is interesting is that process very much taught me about editing, and this goes back to your experience on Blackadder, I think. That thing of it was always the rule that once something was cut, you couldn't reinstate it. So you'd fight
Yes.
your corner. And in fact that there were three of us made it all terribly useful. Because I would go, I think it's a great joke. And the two of you would go, no, it isn't. And it would go. And
Yeah.
there would be no bringing it back.
Yeah. So Dave, Maid Marian finishes, you've written the one episode. What happens next?
Well, it was a good jumping off point for me as a writer, I think. I mean, Mark and I actually worked together quite a lot after that. We worked on a few animations. We wrote a couple of series of Harry's Mad, which was a children's TV series that ITV were doing at the time. So he and I actually worked together for a while, and I think we probably at the time both needed that. We needed that sort of mutual support of working with somebody else, and then gradually got to the stage where we couldn't stand each other anymore and both wanted to do our own thing. So we actually had a big fight, didn't we? Actually,
Well,
felt like,
in
no, we didn't, really.
a practical sense, very practical thing that happened was because we'd written that episode of Maid Marian, the pair of us inherited the same literary agent you'd got.
Oh, that's
Oh,
true.
yes.
And
that's
actually, it's very difficult to start writing professionally without a decent literary agent. So the fact that we got that meant we were able to start writing for TV, and
Yeah.
and one thing led
And
to
it
another.
opened a lot of doors.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
good. And
So how did you shift from children's telly into grown-up telly?
Well, again, it was through you, actually, because if you remember, the BBC approached you with a view to writing and starring in a drama series.
Mighty Powers.
Mighty Powers, that you and I worked on together. We wrote 2 episodes of it. We thought it was fantastic.
I still do.
Yeah.
And they declined to
That's
take
right.
up
The
the
BBC chose not to do it, but really, I mean, I put aside a year of my life pretty much working on that for not very much money, and at the end of it, when it was pulled, I thought, what am I going to do now? The producer I've been working with said, there's this new drama series the BBC are doing called Doctors, and a mate of mine is the producer, and they're looking for people. So I said, I'll do that. I'll do anything. I need to work. And off the back of that, I became a writer on Doctors, and I'm just writing my 30th episode of that now over the last 5 years. And on the back of Doctors, it's a nice story I like to tell. About 10 years ago, I sent a script to EastEnders. I'd written a little drama thing for ITV that had been made, and I sent it to EastEnders and said, I'd really like to write for EastEnders, would you do this please? And I got this letter back saying, well, we're sorry, but actually this script doesn't really, isn't really good enough for EastEnders, so I filed it away and put it down to experience. And then I got the job on Doctors, was writing Doctors. I was then, 10 years later, approached by EastEnders and said, would you like to come and write for us? Which was deeply satisfying all those years later. So I now am a semi-regular writer for EastEnders as
How many episodes of EastEnders have you written?
About 12, I think.
How long does it take you to write an episode?
A similar length to a piece of string. I mean, as long as they give you. Sometimes it's 8 weeks, sometimes it's 3 weeks. It depends on where you fit in within the schedule. Usually about 5 or 6 weeks.
It's quite tough, isn't it?
It's the toughest thing I've ever done as a writer. Because it's all the time, draft after draft after draft. Sometimes you'll do 10 drafts. In the end, you get there. But it can be quite an exhaustive process to get there.
But you don't have anybody to answer to yourself.
No, I mean, I was doing the same kind of thing that Dave's doing. We were writing stuff together, and on occasion finding it quite disenchanting, that process of having to rewrite and people getting their fingerprints all over it to the point where it ends up bearing no relation to what you'd originally written. And all the time this was happening, going back years, I'd been a very passionate reader of crime fiction, and I'd read, anything I get my hands on. And it got to the point where the missing piece of the jigsaw for me was to try and write one. I was writing about them to get free books. I was interviewing crime writers. I was, completely immersed in the whole world. But the only thing I thought I could never do was write, a novel. It just seemed so huge to me. And then sat down one summer holiday with, outside this kind of villa we'd rented in Crete or somewhere, and wrote the first third of what became the first book. Got an agent who sent it out, got very lucky, got published. And
tell us what the books are.
The first book was called Sleepyhead, and they feature this detective called Tom Thorne who works for the Murder Squad in London. And I'm just about to complete the 7th in the series.
And you regularly get into the top 10 novels?
Yeah. It's been,
what number? What's your highest number?
2. That's number 2 last year. Yeah. So we'll see if I can.
And they are very, very good, and utterly sick as well, I have to say.
Yes, it is. It's a pervert's mind.
Well, it gave me. I mean, this is somebody that I'd got to know working on a rather sort of slightly edgy, but basically a children's television series, and all of a sudden I discovered some of the things going on.
Yeah, but can I just remind you guys? Can I just remind you guys of some of the scenes that never made it into Made Married? That the three of us dreamt up, sitting, on the grassy verge under a tree while lights were being. We thought up some sick stuff.
I have to tell you, Mark. I'm just in the process of writing my first novel, and however many it sells, I know that it won't be 1/10 of the number of novels that you sell. And given that I was once the lead writer of the three of us, that really me off.
And you know what, Tone? Hey, welcome to the real world. Stand aside, old man.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, however much you're a well-known name in television, writing for television is still a collaborative process at whatever level it is. I mean, and although it has to be said, one thing that we haven't spoken about so far is that Marion was writer-led. Unlike many other television shows, David, who directed it so brilliantly, always directed the gag. Yeah. The gag always came first, and trying to make the gag work always came first, and make the scripts work.
Which is what, of course, I'd learnt from Blackadder, which is what I'd been doing prior to that.
Yeah.
And that's all what I wanted to do, I think, was to put into practice the education that I'd had through working in Blackadder. In a funny way, that's kind of what you're saying about your experience.
It's true, and it was good, and it was good for us to pick up that from you as well, and have that. And we used to sit around, with a lot of the gags that we had to do as the Sheriff and Gary and Graham, really working out, what the best way to do the gag was, and the best and the timing of it, and some of the Paint Me Pink and Call Me Simon is one I particularly remember.
But you sometimes you have lines cut.
I know that the viewers are falling around.
The old Paint Me Pink gag. But sometimes you'd have to look. You've got that thing as an actor, which would often conflict with that impulse as a writer, because sometimes you'd have to watch your lines get cut in order to serve the joke. Yeah. But that's a discipline that we all had to take on board eventually. To the point when even when we were finally writing our first episode of Made Married, we'd have to give those lines to somebody else.
Actually, Tony's lines never got cut, did they?
No, he never cut any of his own lines. But
strange.
There you go.
It's just an eerie coincidence.
Marion.